Hey everyone, how are you? I've reached chapter 6 of the Palace Papers and I just couldn't stop reading. It's one of those chapters that sticks with you not because of scandal or spectacle, but because it feels like the end of something big. So today, I want to walk you through Swan Songs, the story of how Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother made their exits, each in her own unforgettable way. Let's dive in. Whether there was sympathy or suppressed envy in Margaret's response, the dividing paths of the sisters' future lives were early drawn. The dynamics of the relationship between them never really changed. It was Sense and Sensibility made regal, the glamorous, mercurial Margaret Rose and the graver, more conventional Elizabeth, protecting and reproving her wayward sibling. I think this one line, Sense and Sensibility made regal, sums up everything. Margaret was always the flair, Elizabeth the duty, and they needed each other more than they ever let on. Specialness of position unmoored to any tangible purpose meant that nothing was more exotic to Margaret than the mundane. It was one of her lifelong dreams to ride on a bus. When she asked Lady Anne Glenconner to go shopping with her, she excitedly chose the dullest of high street stores. She derived childlike enjoyment from cleaning Anne's car when she came to stay with her in Norfolk with Roddy Llewellyn. In Moustique, after swimming, like a big sister, she loved untangling Anne's hair. There's something tragic here. She had access to everything, yet longed for what was normal. It's like she was royalty without a role, constantly reaching for a life she was never allowed to live. In her last days, her eyesight deteriorated greatly, and she lost virtually all movement on her left side. The once great goer had been sadly stilled. For those who remembered her in her glory days, the petite, curvaceous figure, the wide, sensuous mouth, and the sparkling blue cat's eyes that communicated both "come hither and touch me if you dare." Her disintegration was shocking. There was public shock the last time she was seen out, wheeled with swollen face and dark glasses into the 100th birthday party of the Dowager Duchess of Gloucestershire. I think what makes this painful isn't just her physical decline, it's how she faded from public memory. Margaret, the woman who once captivated the world, became a cautionary tale, tucked away. The princess told the queen, "I may not have achieved very much, but I at least feel my life has not been wasted because I have produced two happy and well-adjusted children." The remark had the usual buried Margaret zinger, but it was true. Despite the turbulence of the Snowdon marriage, Sarah and David were much less beset by emotional drama than the children of Prince Philip and the Queen, so I feel this was her quiet triumph. For all the chaos and the failed marriage, she raised two grounded kids. And that's not nothing, especially in that family. She was hesitant about sitting for the portrait at first, then suddenly changed her mind, perhaps knowing she had very little time to live. Looking solemn and strained in a heavy black brocade top, the princess elected to wear the diamond, pearl, and turquoise Imperial Order of the Crown of India insignia, prominently pinned on a blue ribbon. In her frequently disenchanted royal way, Margaret embodied Britain's journey from a confident imperial past to a humbler, more demotic present. The Guardian mused that Margaret's life, above all, posed that essential question which Diana, in her own way, was trying to answer. What exactly is a princess for? That is what the turbulent, unresolved quest of hers had been about. Margaret's casket, shrouded by her personal royal standard and adorned with flowers, was carried by 8 servicemen from the regiment of the Royal Highland Fusiliers. The princess had chosen the music, and Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake sounded as the mourners entered the chapel. The image of Swan Lake playing as her casket arrives, it's haunting and poetic. It turns her exit into a ballet, a final bow from the royal rebel. It was typical of the Queen Mother's sense of obligation that Princess Margaret's funeral would be the last duty she was determined to fulfill. She had often said that she hoped to live to see Lilibet's golden jubilee, but greater than that hope was her fear of disrupting the occasion with her death. While the Queen and Prince Philip left almost immediately after Margaret's funeral for a 2-week Commonwealth tour, the Queen Mother returned to Royal Lodge and continued her roster of commitments, hosting a lawn meet for the Eton Beagles and a house party for the Grand Military Race meeting at Sandown Park. With serene efficiency, she then started to make phone calls and dispense small personal gifts to staff and friends that indicated she was bidding farewell. There's something profoundly graceful about this. She timed her departure like it was another royal engagement. Not a drama, just a quiet wrapping up. Standing with Martin Charteris, her then assistant private secretary, in Clarence House, a mere 3 weeks after her accession to the throne, the Queen saw her mother's car driving up to the front of the house and turned to Charteris and murmured, "Here comes the problem." Elizabeth was sensitive to her mother's unhappiness, understanding how humiliating it was to see the king's former staff turn away from her to the new regime, leaving her feeling an isolated irrelevance. She, who had been for a decade and all through the dark hours of the war, the pivot of sovereign power. Elizabeth said nothing when her mother continued to sign her name Elizabeth R. as if the king were still alive. Such was the Queen's dislike of confrontation. She always felt she had to placate her. I think this scene captures a lifetime of emotional entanglement in just a few lines. The Queen Mother never really stepped out of the spotlight. She lingered at the center of tradition, caution, and ceremony, often resisting change with the full weight of a century behind her. I think this was the Queen's greatest balancing act, loving a woman who could still pull rank and push her buttons at 90. To the end of her life, she was in demand to host fundraisers at Clarence House. Guests would gather in the drawing room while she waited in the adjoining salon, knocking back a martini. Then the doors would open and she'd send out a scrabble of smelly corgis to kick up some disturbance to announce that her tiny self was on the way. There ensued such familiar sunny routines as, "Oh, Mr. Branson, how are your airplanes these days?" Though her mother's prickly amour propre could be a trial, the Queen's bond with her and gratitude for her work ethic was profound. They shared the same wry sense of humor, the same love of horses and dogs, the same formidable physical stamina. What a way to go out. Not with a whimper, but with a wink. Even into her 90s, she was performing and she loved every second of it. So that was it. 2 women, 2 exits. One carefully staged, the other painfully messy, but both unmistakably royal. I think this chapter showed us what royalty looks like when the lights start to dim, and somehow that makes them feel more human. Thanks for watching. The next episode brings us into a very different kind of reckoning. Stick around.